All right, hi you guys. Today's lesson is coming from Engage New York. It's Module 4, Lesson 13. The objective today is to multiply a unit fraction by another unit fraction. So if you think about that, unit fraction, is that more than 1 or less than 1? So remember those phrases that we learned? A fraction less than 1 by a fraction less than 1. What would be our product? What's going to happen to the product? So pay attention to that and see if it comes back to you. Okay, so the directions, this is coming from the homework. So this is homework 1A. The directions will say solve. Draw a rectangular fraction model to show your thinking. So our first question is, what is half of a cake? So here's our rectangle model. If I take that rectangle and I represent this as being half, right? That's my first step. Then what would I do next to show half of this half? So take this half, and what are we going to do that half? We're going to chop it in half. And we will shade what? A half of it. So this is where we would take out the other color. And we would say that this is representing our half of a half. Okay, and you could shade it all the way through if you want to, showing this is a half and this was a half. So remember how we would look at what's been highlighted twice or colored in twice or overlapped with our cross hatching marks. I can see it's this piece right here. So this would be our product. Okay, so I'm going to show you the equation that would go with that. So you're taking half of a half. What does of mean in math? Of means multiply. So the equation would look like 1/2 of 1/2. And we've been kind of practicing with this. When you multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across. So 1 times 1 equals 1, and 2 times 2 equals 4. So when you look at this model, how many total pieces do we have? 4, that's our denominator. And how many did we color in with 2 different colors or have our cross hatching marks go both direction? 1 of them. So we had 1 out of 4. Okay, so your model should match up with your final product. Okay, so think about it. Is a half more than 1 or less than 1? Is a half more than 1 or less than 1? So think to yourself, what happens to the product when you multiply a fraction less than 1 by a fraction less than 1? The product will be less than both factors, right? Okay, let's go ahead and look at another question. And this is again in your lesson today. So the next one is going to ask you what is, let's see, 1B is, what is 1/3? Oops. What is 1/3 of half the cake? What does that equal? Okay, so again, the directions tell us to solve. They want you to draw a rectangular fraction model to show your thinking. So as you guys do your problem set, you may not be able to show me your fraction your rectangular fraction models, but you can certainly show me your final answer, and hopefully you will practice drawing out the fraction models. Okay, so first I'm going to show 1/3. So draw your rectangular model. I'm going to split it into what? Thirds, so 3 equal parts, and I'm going to shade in how many of them? 1/3 of them. So I'm shading in 1/3, and I'm going to label this. That equals 1/3. Okay, then it says 1/3 of, in math, what does the word of mean? Again, of means to multiply. So they want me to take this 1/3 and chop it in half. So here's my 1/3. I'm going to chop it in half. Okay, and I'm going to just finish that equal units going all the way across. Okay, so this right here was representing my 1/2. So you can kind of see the two fractions that you should be multiplying. So as a math expression or a math equation, you'd have 1/2 times 1/3 or 1/3 times 1/2. Okay, we multiply straight across. 1 times 1, our numerator is 1, and 2 times 3, our denominator would be 6. So does that product match up with the model? Whoops, I forgot to even shade in our model. So when I split this in half, I should have shaded in just half of it, and I could go all the way across if I wanted to. What do I see with the two colors or the cross hatching with both directions? This one piece right here is our answer, our product. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total squares or units, and one of them would be shaded in with both colors or with the cross hatching lines going different directions. Okay. All right, let's do another one. So 1C, so now they're kind of going away from the words and they're going to just give you 1/4 of 1/2 equals blank. So 1/4 of half. Again, the same directions for all of number 1. So I'm going to again draw my fraction model. I'm going to represent 1/4. So 4 equal parts. How many do I shade? The numerator tells me how many to shade, so I shade in one of them. And I'm going to label this as my 1/4. Okay. Math of, the word of means what? Multiply. So now I have to take and show that 1/4 and chop it into how many parts? How many parts? 2 parts. So chop it in half right there. And then finish those units going across. And I'll shade in 1/2 of that. So going the other direction. Okay. And I would label this as my 1/2 of my 1/4 unit. Okay, so again, there's that equation looking right at us. 1/2 times 1/4, 1/2 times 1/4, or 1/4 times 1/2. Of means multiply, so 1 times 1 equals 1. 4 times 2 equals 8. Look at our model, and let's see if that represents 1/8. What do I see overlapped or cross-hatched in both directions? I see this one piece out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 out of 8. Okay. And again, if you look at this, is 1/4 more than 1 or less than 1? It's less than 1. Is 1/2 more than 1 or less than 1? Less than 1. What happens to the product when you multiply two fractions that are less than 1? Well, look at our product. Is 1/8 larger than this? No. Is 1/8 larger than 1/4? No. So your response to that would be, what happens when you multiply a fraction less than 1 by another fraction less than 1? The product will get smaller than or less than both factors. All right, let's do one more together. And then you guys will be ready to work on your own. This is again number 1, but it's question 1D. 1D, they just give you 1/2 times 1/5. What does that equal? Well, the same directions apply. So solve and then draw a rectangular fraction model to show your thinking. I'm going to start with my rectangular fraction model. I have to draw that and split it in half. And I need to shade 1 out of 2. So there's my 1/2. Okay, now you're going to take your 1/2 And you're going to chop it up into how many equal parts? 5 equal parts. So 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I need to shade in how many of those fifths? One of them. Okay, so that represents my 1/5 right here. Okay, now you're going to look at your final model here. What do I see that's cross-hatched in both directions? Or if I use 2 different colors, overlapped with 2 colors. It'd be this one piece right here, right? Okay, so when I multiply straight across on the equation, 1 times 1 equals 1, 2 times 5 equals 10. That would be my product. Does the model match up? Well, how many total pieces do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How many were colored twice? Just the one, so 1 out of 10. So again, your model should match up. And if you go back to that same math question that we've answered many times this year, what happens to the product when you multiply a fraction less than 1 by a fraction less than 1? You should now know the product will get less than both factors. All right, you guys, on your next slide, you will have the problem set questions. And so if you could just work through those, you'll just write your answers on the slide. If you want to write it out on lined paper or whatever paper you have and take a picture and upload the picture, or just send me a picture, that would be fabulous as well. So seeing if you could upload a picture right onto the Google slide would be really good practice for you guys. All right. Thanks for joining me today and have a good day. See you guys tomorrow.